A facilitator is someone who guides people in a group conversation, helping them understand common objectives and forming a plan to achieve them. One of my favorite definitions for a facilitator is someone who helps everyone else in the room do their very best thinking. What are the tools facilitators use to achieve this goal? Questions. But not all questions are created equal. Any good conversationalist can ask questions that keep the conversation flowing, but it takes a good facilitator to ask the kind of questions that will direct that flow toward the desired end. A good guide for asking good questions would be the work of educational psychologist Benjamin Bloom. Bloom's goal was this: if I could have one wish for education, it would be the systematic ordering of our basic knowledge in such a way that what is known and true can be acted on. In order to reach this goal, he and his colleagues devised a hierarchy of thinking skills that became known as Bloom's Taxonomy. Using Bloom's Taxonomy as a guide, the goal of the instructor is to help students climb the rungs of better and better thinking, starting with knowledge, the ability to simply memorize information. Next comes comprehension, the ability to understand what was learned. Then application, the ability to put that knowledge to use. Higher still is analysis, the ability to deconstruct a problem, and synthesis, the ability to create a solution. And perhaps most important of all, evaluation, not just the ability to judge the quality of the work produced by one's thinking, but the ability to judge the quality of one's thinking itself, which is the key to self-directed learning and self-improvement. Let's scale the levels of this hierarchy and see how specific types of questions actually solicit different levels of thinking. I'll also share some keywords for crafting your own questions to target each level. Let's get started. In order to label, locate, or describe something, I must have a certain amount of knowledge. Therefore, to test someone else's knowledge, I might ask questions like, can someone label the parts of speech in this sentence? Can anyone locate Australia on this map? Who can describe a baseball diamond? It's really the verbs, what I'm asking that other person to do, that determine whether I'm testing their knowledge, comprehension, application, and so on. Therefore, if you specifically want to test someone's knowledge and focus solely on their knowledge, you need to create questions using verbs that test knowledge, such as recite the Pledge of Allegiance, define photosynthesis, describe a public library, name the shortest month of the year, identify the opposing quarterback, label the parts of the digestive system, list all the presidents, locate Hollywood, California, select the brightest green. This is not a comprehensive list, but hopefully it's enough for you to now understand the criteria for adding other verbs to this list. Let's move on. In order to explain an idea, create an analogy, defend a position, I need more than mere knowledge. I need comprehension. To test someone's comprehension, I might ask questions like, can someone explain justice? Can anyone compare a computer to a bicycle? Can you defend why we use the imperial system rather than the metric system? If you want to test someone's comprehension, create questions with verbs like explain, illustrate, defend, match, distinguish, compare, interpret, summarize, give examples. In order to solve a problem, draw a diagram, predict an outcome, I must be able to apply knowledge. To test someone's application of knowledge, I might ask questions like, can anyone solve the problem on page 13? Can someone draw the water cycle on the board? What do you predict our stock price will be next quarter? If you want to test someone's application of knowledge, create questions with verbs like organize, solve, choose, diagram, draw, map, prepare, demonstrate, produce. In order to break down, categorize, prioritize, I have to be able to analyze problems, situations, data, etc. To test someone's analysis, I might ask questions like, can anyone break down this story into plot and subplot? Can you categorize the items in this refrigerator by food group? Could someone prioritize the list of supplies we'll need for the camping trip? If you want to test someone's analysis, create questions with verbs like compare, categorize, classify, break down, distinguish, differentiate, survey, prioritize, graph. In order to construct, create, experiment, I have to be able to synthesize different pieces of information and ideas into new ones. To test someone's synthesis, I might ask questions like, can anyone construct a mock-up for this product? Can you create a fresh look for these outdated marketing materials? Will someone please experiment with this process and find a better workflow? If you want to test someone's ability to synthesize, create questions with verbs like design, create, invent, organize, hypothesize, experiment, plan, develop, construct. In order to appraise, critique, judge, I have to be able to evaluate. To test someone's evaluation, I might ask questions like, can someone appraise our current situation? Would anyone like to critique our new strategy? How would you judge the work we've done here today? If you want to test someone's evaluation, create questions with verbs like judge, compare, weigh, consider, criticize, critique, appraise, assess, recommend. Not only can these classifications help you ask better questions, but you can use the hierarchy as a whole to give the entire conversation structure and direction. As an example, let's say some of our employees are ignoring a few of the company's safety regulations. We'll call them together and facilitate a conversation to solve this problem. And we'll use the hierarchy I just described to ask the right questions in the right order. We'll start the conversation by asking someone to recite the safety policy or describe a proper procedure just to make sure everyone is aware, because some employees may not have been properly informed. We'll then ask someone to explain and give clear examples because other employees, though already informed, may have simply misunderstood. Then we might ask a volunteer to demonstrate proper procedure or ask the group to predict what might happen if we ignore proper safety. We do this for the benefit of those employees who knew and understood the policies, but never really thought about the consequences before. We ask this first set of questions in order to get everyone onto the same page, and this alone might solve the problem if the issue was merely poor communication. But we need the higher levels of thinking to solve those more deeply rooted problems. That's why, once we're on the same page, we'll ask our employees to survey the situation and break it down and identify the real obstacle that is keeping us from adhering to the policy. Perhaps there's a manager that isn't allowing enough time to follow the proper procedure, or there's something inherent in the system that actually incentivizes employees to ignore the procedure, and so on. Bottom line, if the employees can articulate the problem, then they've already been talking about it, which means they already have ideas on how to fix it. So ask the employees to create a solution, or develop a plan, or at least get the ball rolling in that direction. Then, most importantly, have everyone step back and assess their work. Discover what was missed, and make further recommendations. I hope you found this presentation informative. Thank you for listening.